hand every single turn. So there are these kind of flags that you can look out for, but yes, I do think this is one of the most intricate, most interesting and most difficult matchups to really navigate around Glide perfectly at all times.
It's definitely something that I would do, is just happen to play from the left and my opponent's like, oh, he's got Glide, I'm going to dump all my cards. And I'll win off the back of it and I'll be like, I'm so good at this game. It'll be perfect.
Raven just in his happy place, just jamming cards, not thinking about anything. And
hey, I was in practice.
Genius. That's true. Raven got to play Face Hunter for the vast majority of practice. But like, he just went silent. He just didn't want to talk to us. He was just 100% in the zone, just jamming Face Hunter.
Yep. And then I 2-0'd as Garrote Rogue against all the other casters combined. So throw that out there. Here, though, getting to this way more important game than our practice sessions for now. RDU's opening hand is not so great. It is helped by that Shroud. He can at least start drawing cards. Whether he chooses to do it now or next turn is a big question, and that answer has been given.
Interesting. Prep Shroud. Okay, so 2 questions you need to answer here, or at least one of 2 questions that you need a compelling answer to. What were you going to spend 1 mana on this turn that you really wanted to save? Or what were you going to spend 3 mana on next turn, right? That wasn't just the Shroud that you haven't cast. Like, one of those 2 questions needs to be somewhat compelling, and I suppose Cult Neophyte is a satisfactory answer to the second one.
Yeah, or even if he drew Field Contact right, he could maybe set up Field Contact Step this turn for 3 mana.
I mean, I would advise against it generally, because I think, yeah, if you did it this turn, you'd be lining up straight away into Coin Glide, if that's an option for your opponent, right? With a very clear signal to do so to the opponent. But yeah, it's a possibility.
Yeah. I do think it's tricky this early to be like, am I really just going to, like, oh, I don't know. It's so tricky to play around Glide and consider it, especially for us while we're casting, because we can just see whether it's there or not, so it naturally doesn't help conversation.
Quest completion plus Tusk Piercer for Blyze through a Cult Neophyte on that turn, and still with I-Beam Coin Glide locked up for the following turn as well. That's about as good a Hearthstone turn as you can possibly ask to have through a Cult Neophyte on the other side. RDU does still have counterplay though. Golem, pick up a 5 and probably think about stepping your Neophyte here to protect from that fear of Glide if you're holding a Golem in your hand.
Yeah, I think if you take 5, you almost just have to step, right? It ticks every box. You're not only lowering your hand count for if Glide comes down next turn or whatever, but you also do protect the ability to play a Golem next turn. And especially, he had the option for a +2/+2. So I'll be interested to see if he did go for it. He did. And stealth, okay. It's a bit of a strange Golem there, not one we see often, but it does mean he gets to potentially push with a 5/5 in the form of that Kazakus. If it lived, of course.
Yeah, with the minions going down, we'll probably now see a Secret Passage turn instead, just to try and refill a board, maybe stick some minions here for that Golem on the following turn. One Thief is ideal. Divine Shield is very helpful as well.
Tricky. Field Contact Org Merchant is decent, draws an additional card, gets the Field Contact on board, but is that just too weak? Is it just too risky? I think so. Don't hate Netherwind play here.
Yep, RDU agrees. Pretty much guaranteed to get a minion out of that this turn. We saw already Crossroads Watchpost and the havoc that it wreaks.
Oh.
Demon Hunter on the other side. Yikes. That is enormous.
Pretty big. See what comes out here, gets the Il'gynoth. Another Glide as well, giving Blyze some flexible choices next turn. Another Glide as well.
Oh! That's Kurtrus! He got one more draw from the weapon, and then 2 mana glide off the 0 mana Illidari Studies discount. Also glides another glide back into the deck that he can now top deck as well with how disruptive a card it is. That's cute and all, but there is still a 5/7 on the other side of the board hitting him in the face every turn.
He's going to play a 7/7 next turn, though, so that can definitely help.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that, as far as RDU is concerned, that's the 2 natural glides out of the deck. I think that's how Blyze played it.
Yeah, I think so.
But again, the speed in which Blyze plays, sometimes it's hard to keep track of.
Brain Freeze is huge. Getting the Golem back is huge as well. Somewhat incentivized now. RDU just to put another minion in play. Problem is Ethereal Org Merchant with 1 health, like even as a bare minimum, Blyze would just be able to go Demon Slayer Kurtrus and Hero Power into the 2/1, so it doesn't really add any significant amount of damage with the Greater Golem hitting the buffs.
Wait a minute already. Not too far away from piecing together a combo here. It's some mana away, of course, as Blyze having full mana cards in hand, which is strange bit for this part of the game, but with that Spectral Sight as well already in the outcast position.
Yeah, you just draw the other Spectral Sight off the top, and then you draw, I don't know, Philosophy Talented Arcanist off your 0 mana Spectral Sight, and then it's lethal. Yeah, easy. I say that, I mean, Blyze will actually just do that, right? We've seen this happen before. I've realised I'm not even joking. That's just a spoiler. That's literally what's about to happen.
And if he gets asked, he'll be like, but it was a lethal chance, why wouldn't I do it? It's like just completely like, well, yeah. Here, though, Ardu's making a huge push. The help of the Dark Spear there, just chucking that extra 7 damage.
Okay, now he needs the other Fell Screen Blast for 0, because he can't spend the 1 mana on the 1 that he has. Okay, unlucky. Just strictly unlucky there.
Can still draw 2 more.
He can. And he will.
I see.
Alright, not lethal, fine.
Yeah.
Pleasure doing business.
Far away. He wasn't that far away. They were all like hanging out in the first 5 or 6 cards.
This is still a sick cleanup. Deals 5 damage to RDU as well because the Dark Spear's Death Rattle gets to clean up, goes up to 27, and basically says to RDU, you're gonna have to beat me quick here. Because as soon as Kurtrus and a turn like that happens, RDU must be afraid right now.
Right.
Okay, Swindle, Org Merchant.
Second Contact. Interesting. I don't think it's worth playing that one and stepping it back just so you retain it in your original hand. I think that's nonsense.
Well, the slight issue, of course, he does play Arcanist, so this is a bit different, but he did play out already one of his Ethereal Org Merchants, didn't he?
Yes, yeah. But again, generally you are okay just because of that Talented Arcanist interaction. Essentially functioning as 1 Org Merchant and 1 Shadow Step all in one for potentially 0 mana since it's only a 2-cost minion to begin with, and you get both Octobot discounts on there.
Wait, has he played Arcanist?
Is the other one just in his original hand still? It might be.
Oh, yeah, it is. Okay. I was very confused. I was like, 1, when did he play it? And 2, why? That's not how it should work.
Philosophy while you can for the outcast, but now he needs this Illidari Studies to pick up card draw. That's not ideal card draw, but I guess it'll have to do. Dumps out the Viper, could play the 2 Moargs here just so they're done if he's really officially going for lethal this turn. Alright, chooses just to play 1.
He wants this field
There's the
contact.
Fell Scream, there's an Il'gynoth!
Oh.
There's an Arcanist! What? if that last card was the other Moog, if he'd have just played the other Moog.
Yeah.
Good lord.
Pleasure doing business.
Okay, so he bops the field contact. And now, RDU, because of that glide, his last card was the other field contact, so it was like a guaranteed easy time, even if this one got cleaned up. But because of glide, that is not necessarily the case, and now RDU cannot draw anything this turn. This is just his hand. Does have the Ignite to kill off this Moog, no problem.
Going to use the Divine Shield trade and a Pen Flinger here, it would seem. Retain the Flinger on board for maximum pressure. Definitely not playing a Garrote at this point, I think. Now Blyze currently sat on 9 damage, finds Glide again.
So play the Il'gynoth glide.
That was the 3rd glide that he picked up, having already played the 4th one that he picked up on the previous turn. Yes, obviously you cannot play Arcanist and then glide, because then you just give your glide spell damage +2. I know we've been talking about broken interactions, but it's not that broken. Why do you just do this every time? Best he can do, push 18.
He does have Il'gynoth on board, though, and there's not normally a great way for that thing to die against Rogue, apart from a Prize Plunderer, which I think is available. No Shadow Step as well for the one he's got on board, so Il'gynoth is a huge threat. Hello, Field Contact?
Here to have some spectator issues. We can clearly see that Field Contact was the draw, but what RDU has done with it remains a mystery up until this point.
We're good. We're back. Good to go.
Okay.
I think that's when the card is grabbed very quickly from the draw. I think it can cause that issue.
But this time, last turn, RDU had the Battlecry minions, did not find the contact. This time, he finds the contact, but the only Battlecry minion he has on board is the Pen Flinger.
Just get to kill this off, though, right? He just plays Garrote. Or just draws the Ignite again. We can bounce the Pen Flinger and kill this if he really wanted to.
Choose soon.
There goes Il'gynoth. The Moag's going to be cleaned up now, and does Blyze just have to hero power this turn and next turn? And that definitely looks like too long, Subtle.
It does, unless there's like an Illidari studies into a Gnar Glavesmith or something like that left in his deck, but I don't believe so, right? I think we're down to the tradables at this point.
Acrobatics.
Yep. Tradables and card draw.
Not many cards. I am out of cards.
Just going to play the minions. Hope for the best.
You look like you love a good
Has to kill the field contact in that instance, and just hope one of these minions then lives. Because now these cards get drawn for RDU, and there is no more card draw at this point.
And he can only bounce his Pen Flinger once, so he can only kill one of these minions. Right? Unless I'm going crazy?
So many.
I think so. If he'd have drawn the Ignite, he could have used the Arcanist just to give the spell damage +2 to the Ignite and then cleared up that way with the Pen Flinger. But drawing the spell damage specifically, the Ethereal Orc Merchant, was the worst draw he had left remaining in his deck at that point, I believe, because even if you draw the other Garrote, that's another bounce for the Pen Flinger that can then potentially clear up the board at that point, alongside the additional spell damage from the Arcanist. So, yeah, really weird, scrappy endgame state there, which, was created by both players, I would say, kind of doing unconventional things, and it got down to the end. The glides were obviously super disruptive and made RDU have to go for abnormal lines because he couldn't reliably set anything up with his last field contact, just kept getting shuffled back into the deck. But then there's a couple of turns as well with Moargs, Ilganots and Glides from xBlyzes, where there were a bunch of different outs and you kind of have to pick one and go for it. He went for one which was valid, but then hit the other one twice in a row, so it ends up like looking a little bit silly. But I don't think there's anything like strictly wrong with what he ended up doing in that scenario.
Does mean we are going to be moving on to our game number 2, which is going to be xBlyzes on this Druid, the Anaconda package again, the one we saw from Gabby, the one we saw earlier on as well. No, sorry, we didn't see earlier on from xBlyzes because he lost 3-0 with Warlock. He's going to be going up though against RDU's Hunter, and again it just feels like we might be going back to the Bunny Hopper Gabby matchup of Hunter versus Druid, is that you can just go too fast. As long as you don't have a complete whiff on the minion opening, you can pretty much get there. But just checking over RDU's deck for Hunter, it's a little bit different. Only one Bone True in there. He is playing a Wriggling Horror, I believe, in its place. But outside of that, the general package is pretty much the same with that one True Aim as well.
Yeah, I think so. Fairly standard outside of that one difference, which you alluded to. And again, I think RDU's overall strategy is similar in spirit to what Alan and Bunny are doing. It's just he's kind of doing it more with 4 pure aggro decks, right? Or 3 in the Rogue, right? 'Cause still, most people seem to think that Garrote Rogue is just too powerful to not be included in basically any kind of strategy overall. You know, Bunny being one of the few outliers to that regard. So I think RDU has these kind of matchups in mind as well, right? Just play a bunch of very, very aggressive aggro decks, hunt down the Anaconda Druid on the other side. Makes a ton of sense. It's why we're seeing a deck like Aggro Druid come into his lineup, which I believe he has never played before in GM up until this point.
Never played before.
He's just literally never played it. Yeah, can't play Aggro Druid in Battlegrounds. It just means that he has a very solid chance of sweeping the Druid in this series overall, I would say.
Yeah, they're off to a fantastic start. Initiate Orc Merchant with Adorable Infestation is one of the most aggressive openings, as well as being half defensive as well, that you can possibly get. And I think xBlyzes might regret not going for Lunar Eclipse that turn.
Yeah. This is the exact punish, for sure. Going to throw it out here anyway to cut a bit of additional damage off the board. Really needs this Guess the Weight to hit twice, and now it certainly will with that Celestial Alignment, unless... Okay, we're fine.
And here now, xBlyzes is more than likely going to take the approach of that Initiate's probably not going to die until the game's decided, but I can kill everything else, or at least try to challenge everything else. Because that Initiate, there's just no good way it actually gets cleaned up.
You saw the nod come out there from xBlyzes toward the Cult Neophyte that came down on that turn, basically shutting down anything he could possibly do. Like, at least without the Neophyte, he could have played, what, 4 2-2s that turn, used them to clear up the board, and actually been in with some kind of chance of stabilizing and getting back into the game. But Cult Neophyte, I think, may have been the final nail in the coffin.
Really hope RDU presses hero power this turn.
Job's done.
Okay, good. I get excited when I see the double Felmore turn just because I'm here with Sottle, but I do think one Felmore hero power definitely right. He is just really chasing xBlyzes down now, and there's not a lot xBlyzes can do about it.
Nope.
That's 8.
Once again, Felmore being objectively terrible. Literally any card in Hearthstone was lethal there, but he drew a 0/0 instead. Yep, cool.
Any card? Do I have to pull you up on this, Sol? Do I have to be
Wisp
that guy?
was lethal. No, it wasn't. You know what I mean.
Was Holy Light lethal? That's
Hyperbole for dramatic effect, Raven. You know it well.
good old Hyperbole.
Good old Hyperbole. Why have a regular bowl when you can have a Hyperbole? I mean,
It's
honestly.
just cooler.
Yeah.
Like adding RGB to words.
I can see.
There's the concede there from xBlyzes, just like that. In a much more straightforward and rapid fashion, RDU evens up the series, and again, you just see the weakness and see the maybe spark of genius with these lineups. And RDU and Bunny did not go in exactly the same direction. Obviously, RDU does have Hunter, does have the Aggro Druid, but he does have the Elemental Shaman and the Garrote Rogue. So it's not quite the same, but the overall idea is there, and it does look like they're doing a good job of preying on some of the other European Grandmasters.
Yeah, you do have to go back to that original decision, just not to shoot the Initiate and take, what, 12, 16 damage from it over the course of the game, which ended up being pretty horrible for xBlyzes in the end. But yeah, I think your assessment of the situation is very accurate. RDU is kind of having this plan in mind. I think it wasn't difficult to notice a growing trend in Anaconda Druid, particularly in Europe, especially because Gabby and xBlyzes, who are two of the very successful players, two of the competitive players who actually stream a lot and jam a lot and are very visible, do both favor that deck very heavily, or at least versions of Celestial Druid. So I think it was very quickly identifiable as a growing trend in Europe, and a deck that some people might try and counter coming into this. And again, this point needs to be hammered home. You are massively rewarded for trying risky target strategies in playoffs, because in a regular season week, finishing 4th, finishing 3rd, finishing 5th, whatever, fine. You take those, you put it under your belt, and you say, great, that's a solid week's work. See you again next week. In playoffs, you have to win, or you're not going to Worlds. That's just the harsh reality of it. So these all-or-nothing strategies suddenly have a lot more value in a playoffs world than they do in a weekly Grandmasters regular season world. So that's why you see more of these strategies where players are taking risks, playing kind of in a vacuum worse decks than you might be used to seeing overall, but because they pick up such enormous amounts of percentage in particular matchups, and that's just how Conquest works.
We are going to be seeing Druid once again, but it is from RDU with this Aggro Druid. Going to be lining it up against Warlock. And again, we've seen a similar issue where Warlock, yes, Soul Rend is very powerful, but if a whole turn is used to Soul Rend and then there's refill, then, you know, problems start occurring. And the big card, as usual for me with Druid, really is that composting, because it's just needed to keep up the pressure. Because outside of that, and I get then peasant before someone calls me on it, Druid just doesn't really have access to refill unless they have exactly those cards available to them.
Yeah, so here we go again. Aggro Druid, which, you know, I do think might have just been the bring in terms of decks overall coming into this week. I think it was a very, very smart choice overall for the players that have brought it. I can't really fault it in terms of the matchup spread you're expecting to see in most series. And, you know, while I have my arguments about Quest Rogue and Libram Paladin, because yes, they win certain matchups, but I think like the average just generic strength of the deck is not there. Like, Aggro Druid also just does some generically disgusting things that can win you any game of Hearthstone overall.
xBlyzes' opening has been generically disgusting as well, because he's cleaned up everything RDU has thrown at him so far.
You ever hear something you said repeated back to you and just go, why did I put those two words next to each other? Generically disgusting? What does that even mean?
I'm afraid not. I think everything I say is perfect.
Oh, okay. Must be nice.
Especially how I say it.
Yeah, oh, no doubt about it.
I do like this from RDU, even though it doesn't get max value from the Wriggling Horror. He does just make this difficult to kill, especially after he's just seen all that removal from xBlyzes. It is just simply unlikely that he has a way to respect this.
And here come those disgusting things.
Teacher's Pet composting here?
Is it Pet or is it Greybow? Okay, are you going to go with the Pet?
Well, I think he's scared of Soul Rend, right?
Yeah, no, I would agree.
And when there's if this Teacher's Pet lives, then when you put Greybow on the board with a Death Rattle that Death Rattles into another minion, things start getting very, very silly. Oh, yes! I love that card.
We saw some of the more disgusting outcomes that you can get from Teacher's Pet if you were paying attention to the APAC broadcast.
Did we? I only saw a blank 2-5.
True, yeah. I think Possessi just decided that rolling poison 3 times in a row was criminally unfair, so he just removed the poison in the interest of game balance.
Here, though, RDU's been pushed into a position you never really want to be in, which is actually thrown and behind the board here by xBlyzes.
Yeah, good reload though still with the Grey Bow, but only takes a couple of small spells here to be able to eliminate this threat entirely.
That's one.
Yeah, any combination of Mortal Coil, Drain Soul, Touch would be able to get through this most of the time.
Yeah, most importantly, you can do it in a way that makes Grey Bow die last, which is what you want to do.
Exactly, yep. And then, lo and behold, a giant appeared.
Oh, this was nerfed.
Turn 6, cleared 3 boards, played an 8/8 for 0 mana.
But most importantly...
Thoughts of Warlock's demise were greatly exaggerated, Raven.
Squirrel.
Squirrel!
What is it?
The peasants hit the board now. The true boss of this deck. And as xBlyzes just ran out of good removal, is the peasant going to draw the whole deck here for RDU? Probably not.
Quick look at the hand. No. No, that's not going to happen. You want to rend some souls this turn, Raven?
I think so. And I'm also wondering whether...
Push the 8, Raven?
I think so. Looks pretty good, doesn't it?
You want
Another
to
bristleback?
coin a tour guide, Raven?
No. Too much.
Oh, okay. So
Double Barons.
Damn.
Double Baron Scavenger still in xBlyzes' deck means that that's just going to be too much, I think, yeah. Not only the control from the Giant and the 2 Bristlebacks, but the fact that there were still Scavengers available for 1 mana going forward was just too much, and honestly, that was almost a perfect Warlock hand to deal with what happened, right? All the early removal, he got rid of the post very early on the turn it was played to only have 1 card extra cost. He then answered the Priestess of Oracle of Elune, not Priestess, sorry, Oracle of Elune. He answered easily as well, and that the answers just kept being there for xBlyzes. And RDU never really, as you can tell by the health that xBlyzes ended up with, never really stuck a board for more than a turn, and that's exactly what you want to do with Druid. And I think the turn he ended with the Null as the only minion on board was the pivot point, right? Where RDU then had to play into a board that already existed, which is really what you don't want to do with Druid.
Right, and that means that xBlyzes is now on the hill. He has just Druid left to win with of his own. This is not aggro Druid on xBlyzes' side. This is the Anacondra Celestial Druid, and I think this is the crux of the series, right? This is the deck that might just struggle to get a win. It's not quite as extreme as it is in Bunny Hopper's series, because again, RDU's only dipped 1 toe in the water here. He hasn't jumped in fully with both feet because he's still got that Garrote Rogue instead of the Quest Rogue that Bunny Hopper's going with, for example. So there is just a little crack that the Druid can be able to sneak through if it needs to. But this matchup sucks, right?
Yeah.
Like, aggro Druid against Celestial Druid, this is a beating for the Celestial Druid.
And also this opener from RDU does not suck. That is pretty good. Even going to buff the peasant the respect.
Mm-hmm.
This time xBlyzes doesn't have a choice. Doesn't have the Luna available.
This peasant is just never going to die. RDU's just going to draw 2 cards a turn for the entire game. Good luck.
Seems like a pretty good card. Even though going 2 more 1-drops looks good, I think I still like Bone Chewer.
Yeah, I like Bone Chewer. It's fairly aggressive here. It sets you up for some decent top decks. It also plays around some weird niche scenarios, like I don't know, nature studies into Feral Rage or something like that. Just cuts it down to exactly Lunar Eclipse.
I also just, this is going to sound really stupid, but it also just plays around hero power, right? Like, it's kind of dumb, but you know what I mean, right? Like, Blyze won't hero power the minion, and then he gets to do the 1/1/1 on turn 3.
Agreed. Oh.
Now, does he give the peasant the divine shield? Yes,
Yep.
RDU wants all the cards in the world.
Yeah, I mean, we might have been able to have the discussion if he'd have gone with the Bone Chewer Brawler on the previous turn, because then enraging that and attacking with it with a Divine Shield on the same turn probably outweighs the Peasant. But yeah, doing it this way, just spread wide, set up for that Arbor up in the coming turns.
Yeah, I think that would be a very simple argument of, well, now there are 2 must-kill minions instead of 1, so great. But yeah, this Peasant is just wrecking faces right now. There's Composting, there's another Peasant, there's his mate.
Step up! What is it?
Ay, ay, ay.
Once again, for the people in the back, this matchup sucks.
What's really weird to see is this Anaconda Druid isn't a bad deck, as Blyze just called it a day on that one. It's an incredibly strong deck, which is why some of these Grandmasters have brought it. It is, I think it's fair to say, dominated the past few weeks of Grandmasters. I think it's looked incredible. But the problem is, if that Druid then slots into your lineup and then your lineup starts to look the same, it's exploitable, which is what we've seen from some of these players. And we've seen Druid take another loss now to the aggression from RDU. Very similar, as I said, lineup that we've seen from Bunny Hopper earlier on. So it's going to be a big question now as we see slightly more standard matchup, which is that Garrote Rogue versus the Anaconda Druid. And this one, honestly, Sol, not even sure where I lie on this one. I think Blyze, after a rocky series, might be feeling a lot better about this last match, at least.
I think he will certainly be feeling better about this match than the one he just played, right? In terms of just having a chance to get out of it. It's very difficult to get reliable data on this matchup overall because they're 2 of the most difficult decks to play in the entire metagame, I would say. So, you know, any win rate that you scout from ladder ranks, you have to narrow it down to like the highest possible ranking, or you're just kind of getting these irrelevant data points from people who aren't playing the matchup correctly. But the decks are so tricky that that's even arguably the case like in Grandmasters, right? Because we still see people, even at the highest level of the game, misplaying specifically with Garrote Rogue, perhaps more than any deck that we've ever seen in the Grandmasters era. So it's definitely a difficult one to nail down precisely, but it is very interesting to see that this is a deck in RDU's lineup when I think otherwise. He just has such a clean Druid target overall.
Right.
And I do think there's kind of a fear factor a little bit that's prevented people from going all the way in. And again, you know, my going live tweet this morning was Bunny Hopper is playing bad decks and I like it. Find out why. And that's kind of what I'm saying, like, is I respect that he fully committed to the strategy, right? Like, even though it means playing an objectively worse deck, I do think it makes more sense for the field that we expect in Europe.
Here's a question, and be honest. If you were submitting this overall strategy lineup, would you have submitted Quest Rogue, Sal? Would you have gone all in?
I mean, genuinely, that's a hard question to answer because I do a little bit of lineup prep before every week of Grandmasters, just so my head is like in the right place as to what I would be bringing. I did not find the lineup that Bunny Hopper and Alan submitted, right? But having then seen that lineup, I prefer Bunny Hopper's lineup to Alan, right? So would I have submitted it? Probably not, because I didn't think of it autonomously myself. But, you know, if someone explained that strategy to me, I think I would certainly play Quest Rogue over the Garrote Rogue to execute it.
All well known for his Tempo Rogue.
True, actually.
The end of every expansion. Here, though, diving in, RDU. Getting a relatively early Octo here, going for reduction with Neophyte. So not only creating levels of disruption for Blyze, but also doing a scarily similar cosplay of the Aggro Druid opening.
Mm-hmm.
going to suggest something silly.
Go on. I'm here for it.
How do you ever just play Neophyte and then step the Ogre Merchant to give that one Divine Shield as well? I mean, at this point, he's so all in, unless he draws exactly a card draw card off the top. Like,
Efficient is sufficient.
do you not just want the biggest and like most sturdy board he can get?
I get what you're saying.
You're not
However,
picking up what I'm putting down, Tom?
Retaining the Shadow Step, though, does allow him to be all in with this existing board for one turn longer, though, right? By doing exactly what you're seeing here, because now this is one more turn where Glowfly Swarm theoretically can't happen. It's one more turn where Arbor Up theoretically can't happen. It's one more turn where like a big Fungal Fortunes turn isn't going to happen either. So this personally would be more where my head's at. Spell damage now available for the Rune Orb if he wants to ship that face as well.
Yeah, no reason for him to not start Rune Orb, right? Like, this Neophyte costs 0, so it doesn't matter when it's played. Unless he's considering Dagger, but guess it kind of pushes more damage over time, unless that spell damage gets lunared anyway.
Right.
Can just like playing it, give himself the most options and most mana next turn for this one card.
Oh.
Wait a minute. Turn that claw machine into a pirate or stealth minion. Use the fish.
More realistically, take Shadow Step, keep playing Cult Neophytes every turn for the rest of the game.
Flame. So that's double Neophyte that turn, right?
That's double Neophyte, yeah. So it even makes like Lightning Bloom useless, for example, if Blyze needed to do something desperate. And he does with double Lightning Bloom in hand.
The Luna takes off 3. There's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 with Dagger.
Oh!
If he gets +1/+1, that's
Yep.
Oh wait, it's 1 off, right?
I'm looking for a few.
Oh, no, it's not. It's 10. I'm being an idiot.
What are you doing? It's 6+4, Raven.
I can't count. Confirmed. Some copy to start challenging those glowflies. Yes.
All right.
True aggro play. I love it.
Yeah, doesn't find the +1/+1. And a Chondra off the top. Exactly.
Germ 1, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a gem.
Does he have enough blooms to claw machine bloom, Anaconda? I don't think so.
No. 1 mana short, and even then he'd need mana to do other things. RDU head in his hands.
Oh,
and the final insult added to injury. The Anaconda getting discarded, and you can see what it means to RDU still after all these years. Heart goes out to Blyze, of course. That is now 2 years in a row he's had big disappointments coming into playoffs. Obviously not quite up to the scale as what happened to him in the previous season, sorry, not year.
I was waiting to correct you.
Yeah. But still a brutal one for him to take because, you know, he comes from the upper bracket, falls down immediately into the lower bracket, and then crashes straight out 0-2 out of playoffs. That is a brutal one for him to take. But RDU is a man with unfinished business. We talked about this on Hot Takes. Best players in history that have never been to the World Championships, and RDU is absolutely a name that crops up on that list. 1 game away from the World Championship twice in his career, and now he finds himself creeping ever closer once again.
Yeah, I think, you know, we can exclude Gabby just because of how recent he is, I guess, if you want to put it that way. But I think RDU is one of the most shocking players that if you told someone that just started to get to know Hearthstone, you'd be like, you know, RDU's never been, and all of these other players have. RDU probably is the name that stands out the most. I can definitely get behind that. For me, though, yeah, it's unfortunate for Blyze. One thing that is a positive on it is that I know Blyze will continue to do well going forward, so I have no doubts that we're going to see him in this kind of position again. But it is just a shame to see, especially not only that he came in a reasonable spot, just having to do the normal group performance, but also that he ran into two very rough lineups. But as you mentioned, that's what can happen, right? Like you can run into these sort of more hard counter style all-in lineups to try and win playoffs, because winning playoffs gets you to Worlds. Second place does not get you to Worlds.
Yeah, and now we're going to run into an interesting situation where two of those players who have taken that risk are going to clash with each other. And this is where now, for example, I think the Quest Rogue of Bunny, despite me saying that I like that decision, perhaps breaking from my character traits significantly throughout the day, he now might be in trouble with that Quest Rogue, because when it comes up against other aggro decks as RDU is playing, that's when it can start to fall apart. So I think we have a very, very nice setup now for who out of Bunny Hopper and RDU are going to be progressing for that other spot, making it to Sunday out of Group A.
Yeah, it's going to be a huge match we've got coming up as our final one of the day. We are just going to take 10 minutes again just to give RDU some time. He's obviously just finished his match, so give him a few minutes just to get ready for his final match versus Bunny Hopper. And again, remind you what's all just said. The winner does go on to Sunday and continues to have a chance at the World Championship spot here this weekend. The loser is going to be done for playoffs, but we are going to go to that break right now. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
It's been a bittersweet week in Grandmasters, seeing the exaltation of players going to playoffs next week, but also having to say goodbye to so many great players. One such player being relegated was Ego Waffle, who did himself proud with a clever, if ultimately fruitless, final turn. Realizing the 7 health